Well, we're still
All right. Thank you. Let me
yes,
know
it's all
if
done.
anything else. Wendy.
Oh, how long it will take? Yeah, I don't know that.
Thank you.
But he has put it up on both of them. Yeah. I'm not really. Well, yeah, that's true. But Carrie sent me a note today that friends recommended and if it does not get up, just like it has to be on like when it gets up to one, it does not do that but if he continues, it's pretty problem. Yeah, and I think he's right now. And I'm really I don't know. I know that he was for a period of time 20 years ago, and they had to restart it because he does have to be. He does have to be. That's the other reason I don't want to come home. Yeah, well, thanks for being available.
Welcome to our presentation today, everybody. It's good to see you all here. So just as a reminder, if you could just keep your masks on during the presentation, and if you're sticking around for the one after this one, you do need to exit the room and then come back in the room. They just need to check everybody back in for each presentation, so it's kind of obnoxious, but yeah, just make sure you leave and then come back. So, just want to introduce our awesome presenter today, David Wood. He's going to be talking to us about motivational interviewing. So he's a licensed psychologist with 20 years of experience in the mental health field. He is a uniformed clinical psychologist for the Utah National Guard and has served for the last 11 years. Dave is also an assistant professor in the School of Social Work at Brigham Young University. He enjoys reading, the outdoors, and time with family. And kind of a fun thing is he was in my cohort at the University of Utah. I didn't realize that we were connected in that way until we talked afterwards. So it's kind of fun to have him here. We're really, really grateful that he is willing to come and present to us today. So we'll turn the table over to Dave.
Okay, everybody, welcome and good morning to Wasatch Behavioral Health. I have great admiration for the organization, for what you do in the community, and we also have a good partnership with the School of Social Work at BYU. We're grateful for what you do for our students. I see some former students here as well. It's great. So looking forward to talking about motivational interviewing, so I can get maybe a little sense of who my audience is today. How many of you are providers? If you might raise a hand, please. So I was thinking about, probably maybe 60% or so. And then how many of you are staff, like support staff for provider clinics? And what are the categories of, that I did not call out? The rest of you are not either providers or support. Does that cover everybody? Support staff and providers? Or is there other categories of employees that I'm missing here? Anything else? Okay. All right. So most of that. Okay, well, pleasure to be with you. Let me tell you a quick story first, and I think about how motivational interviewing can be a useful thing. I was at a movie theater with my sons the other day, a couple years ago actually, and my phone was buzzing during the movie, and I thought, I'm not going to be that guy that opens up his phone in the middle of the movie, and so I just kind of ignored it, put it off a little bit, and then the credits were rolling of the movie, and then all of a sudden my son urgently motions towards me, Dad, you need to call Mom right away. Okay, no problem. So I called my wife, and she said, oh my gosh, I'm glad you answered. It's really confusing right now. The police showed up to our house, and they said that they're here to investigate a possible suicide in progress, and the patient or the person at risk was named David Wood, and all this going on. And it turned out it was a mistaken identity. It was another David Wood in another state, and the way they kind of got to it, I know we probably, I don't know if we have any MCOT or any outreach for crisis people here, yeah. So through the crisis line, they can kind of try to, do a record search to try to locate a person at risk of suicide. And it turned out it was a different David Wood, different state, different branch of the military. It's kind of like they're looking through military records. And so it was a huge relief, quickly resolved. But unfortunately, I think that the individual they were looking for was another state. They actually did take his life. And I thought, darn it, 3 takeaways from that experience. One is that, well, I'm grateful that the crisis line has the capability of doing, searching things out and trying to track people down. And number 2, grateful for the local law enforcement. They were trying to do the best they could. Number 3, I'm grateful that that I'm not at risk of suicide. Now it's good to go. So my wife and my family as well. But also, another takeaway is that I hope that in all of our interactions we can try to help shape conversations and help people in a way that will help them move toward change. In this case, try to prevent and avert suicide. But that's kind of the intention here. So I presented a couple of years ago here at the Wasatch Conference on motivational interviewing, and I'm grateful to be here again. How many of you had a little bit of exposure to motivational interviewing through the courses? Okay, yeah, so most everybody's had some, that's good. So be a little bit of review. If I'm going too slow, and if we're covering things that are too commonplace, we can definitely skip ahead. There is some talk of possibilities. I don't know if there's no plans of it necessarily, but talk of possibly doing some ongoing kind of instruction or training in motivational interviewing. That's something that your training staff will be taking charge of if that's going to ever materialize. But this will be a nice kind of a open introduction to motivational interviewing and hoping you get the idea. The intention here today is to give you a sense of the MI spirit, covering key principles, and then first of all, give you a taste of MI. And then we'll cover some key skills, and then I'll lastly talk about from here on out how you can maybe, if you like this approach, if you think this approach would be useful, how to maybe kind of further your learning and understanding of motivation. With that though, let me also ask, are there any burning questions anybody has about motivation interviewing today? They want to make sure that we answer as a part of the presentation today. Anybody have any burning questions want to make sure that we address? Please, yes.
When a client says, I don't know or I don't care, that's a motivational interview question.
Okay. When you, so the comment was, when a client says, I don't know and I don't care, even after you've offered a brilliant, carefully crafted motivational question, it doesn't pan out. I kind of like the metaphor like a dove. You release this dove across the room, this beautifully crafted thing, and the client smacks it out of the air or whatever. And that can happen for sure. We'll talk about that. That's a skill called responding to sustained talk. We'll get to just a minute here. And it's not easy, and there's no guarantee that what we do will always work, but there's definitely ways we can shape the conversation, help to make it go better. Let's start off with an exercise. So this is one of those dreaded exercises. It's called, we're going to actually interact with your partner or your team. You can be in 2s or 3s. We're going to do what's called a taste of MI. So right off the bat, I'm a member of the Motivational Interviewing Network of Trainers. It's called MINT. And we place a premium on training in a way that makes it interactive and experiential. So here's your experiential opportunity right now. So what I want you to do is get into at least pairs. You can get into 3s if you want. If you're not comfortable doing an exercise, a role play exercise, or a role play exercise, and I know we're wearing masks too, so I know it's a little bit complicated there too, but I'm also informed this is a highly vaccinated population. So hopefully I'm going to get that a little bit too. For those of you who want to participate, I want you to get into teams. One of you will be a helper, and one of you will be a speaker. The helper is kind of like the counselor, the therapist, and the speaker is the client. And the idea is I want you to be, the helper will be a helpful friend, and the speaker will discuss something they are thinking about changing, should change, or want to change. It's kind of that in the yellow there. Examples are exercising, saving money, or planning a trip, for example. And we're going to do this 2 different times in the same roles. You're going to maintain the same roles. You can switch if you want, just a little cleaner. You just keep the same roles. And I'm going to give you instructions in just a moment. Any questions so far about what we're trying to accomplish? You're going to get into roles in just a moment. All right, here we go. Okay, so take 1. The first take or the first attempt at this, what we're going to do is you as the helper or the counselor, the therapist, is going to cover these agenda items here. So these agenda items are as follows. I'm going to mute my screen there. To tell the person how much they need. So for example, if it were me right now, I'm trying to be, I really enjoy mindfulness practice. I'm trying to work on that. My next frontier in mindfulness practice is trying to be more consistent and do it on a daily basis. And so if I were working with if I were the speaker or the client in my real play practice, I would say, what I'm trying to change is being more consistent on a daily basis with mindfulness practice. And so my partner, my helper would say, okay, Dave, let me tell you all how much you need to make this change. You really need to do. I've heard really great stuff about mindfulness. That's the first bullet point. Number 2, here are some reasons why you need to do it. I think you need to do it because it's good for your health, it's good for your stress management, and it's also good for your focus as well. And then Dave, I'm good. Number 3, I want you, it's really, really important that you do this, and let me tell you how you can do it. What you can do is you can set a glass of water next to your spouse in the morning, and if you don't get up and do your mindfulness first thing, she's going to take that glass of water and dump it on you. Okay? That's what you can do. That's a good plan for you to do it. And the item number 5, Dave, I'm sure you can do it. I know you can do it, and I just need you to get on with it. Just do it. Just get in there and just do it. So this is take 1. Okay. So everybody get into groups right now. Choose your helper and your speaker, and go ahead and cover agenda number 1. Ready to go? Move around if you need. If you haven't already started, go ahead and jump in. Ready to go. Raise your hand if you need more time. Everybody done? That was pretty quick, wasn't it? Okay. All right. Let's get squared away for another run at this. Take 2. Take 2 is this. So this time, we're going to reiterate the same change topic. So Dave, what do you want to change? Well, I want to try to do mindfulness practice more consistently on a daily basis. This time, my helper is going to ask a series of questions. The same topics, but just kind of approach them with questions. So my helper is going to say, well, Dave, why would you want to make this change? And I'm going to respond. They're going to say, Dave, how might you go about it in order to succeed? And I'll respond, and then the helper would listen. And then what are your 3 best reasons for you to do it? And I'd offer those. And then they're going to say, hey, how important is it for you to make this change and why? Now, the next step is to summarize. You're going to have to kind of be mindful listening to what the person has said, and you're going to kind of pull together in a summary, and then provide that summary to them. back to the person. And the last question is, my helper will say, Dave, what do you think you're going to do? And that's kind of the take two. Any questions on this one? Okay, go ahead and get in your same groups and do the same topic again, same roles, and then we will go for about 4 minutes or so. Ready? You set? Go.
You know what I mean? Like, don't really right. Speed up that time of like 45. I don't know, I have to know like who's first
Here's your hint if you need more time. You need more time? All right, let's go wrap up. We're all done. Okay, so those were 2 different ways to approach a conversation about change, and let's talk about that. What was take 1 like for you? Go ahead and voice shout out. But please take 1.
It didn't really resolve anything. Like, I just still had the same reasons.
Yeah.
I already knew the reasons going into it. So as you said, I'm like, I know, but that doesn't give me any solutions because I'm
Right.
still doing the same thing.
Right. So the idea is you didn't make any progress, right? It didn't resolve anything, right? You're telling me stuff I already know, right?
Yeah.
And that kind of feels a little condescending, but sometimes isn't it? We're told stuff we already know. Okay, other reactions? Yes, please.
I was doing all the talking.
Okay, the helper was doing all the talking, and that didn't feel right to you. That was kind of like, that was.
Felt right, wasn't right.
It felt right.
In my natural state, this is right now.
Which brings up an important point. Now, you probably understand you're savvy human service professionals and not providers and therapists. You kind of know that take 1 was a little bit of setup. However, you make a very important point. We are inclined to do that sometimes, right? In as much as it's kind of a setup, it seems kind of like, oh great, I know where this is going. We do it sometimes, don't we? We do kind of take a take 1 approach. In my life, I'm a member of Mint, and I practice this stuff all the time, and I train it all the time. But with my kids, I do it a lot. Now that they're becoming more and more adults, I have 3 adult children and 1 minor still, and I'm doing it less and less, which is kind of nice. But anyway, yeah, parenting is a mud pitfall for doing that kind of telling approach. Other reactions to take 1. Nuance. Okay? These are typical reactions based upon the using this exercise. People feel angry, kind of annoyed, irritated, just not understood, right? And then you also have defensiveness. People are like, wait a minute, I already know this. I mean, what are you telling me this for? I feel discounted, I feel judged, I feel justifying, oppositional, unwilling to change. So sometimes in this kind of approach, if a person's ambivalent and we push hard, it can actually kind of create an opposite kind of an argument where the person can come into the situation with this level of motivation and actually leave a lower motivation. We can actually shape it in the wrong direction, right? Uncomfortable, okay, let's get out of this conversation. And then also feeling powerless, like I feel like I'm not engaged and not part of the conversation. Whereas in take 2, what about take 2? How was it different? What did you notice? There's lots of questions, right? Offer lots of questions. What did you notice? Please.
Well, I actually got a real solution. I was like, I don't have any problems to like present, and I actually thought of something and actually have a real solution. And that was surprising because before coming to this room, I was like, there's no solution. And so I just think that it was like, seeing it side by side is pretty amazing.
Sure, yeah. Yeah, you kind of stumble onto something that was very useful, right? And you're at the back with the black and red mask, please.
Sorry. I just felt like it inspired actual thought. I was the speaker, and I actually had to think instead of just like this.
Yeah, right. Yeah, so you're more active. It kind of requires you to be more engaged, right? More kind of alert and looking at. I gotta think about that for a minute. Right, good. Excellent. Please.
I was the helper, and the first time, it felt more actually relaxed for me the second time.
Yeah, sure.
Because the second time I wasn't having to I had to have all the answers.
Yeah.
It was actually easier.
For sure,
To be a
yeah.
helper.
It was easier, the comment was it was easier because you were more of a facilitator, right? Rather than being a motivational speaker. And the first one, the burden is all on you, on your shoulders to make that change happen. Whereas the other ones, I'm like, I'm just gonna let this person kind of facilitate them talking themselves into changing, right? Other thoughts, reactions? Okay. These are common reactions, feeling more engaged, as a lot of our speakers have already said. Feeling more empowered, like, hey, I can do this, I can make some changes. I feel more open, and I also feel more understood, connected, heard, and listened to. So that's kind of the nutshell. Kind of the take 1, take 2, very contrasting types of conversations. And the key thing down here is at the bottom is that, well, which kind of type of client would you rather interact with? Obviously, we'd like to interact with take 2 clients. Now, that's kind of a rhetorical question because there are usually aren't take 1 or take 2 clients. Now, granted, there are some clients that we would interact with that are more prone to maybe pushing back, more kind of confrontational. But the most important thing is that we can shape the conversation more toward a take 2 conversation and away from a take 1 conversation. And that's the spirit of it. That's kind of the taste of MI is that we can do that. By the way that we approach the conversation, we can shape it. And that's the kind of the take-home message. All right, let's move on. So here are some key principles about motivational interviewing. From the outset, MI is not for everybody. We call it MI, by the way. MI is a very kind of overly used acronym. I'm doing research in moral injury for the military right now. That's called MI. And if you're in the medical field, MI is a bad heart situation, myocardial infarction. But MI for today is called motivational interviewing. These are key principles. It's not for everybody because it takes time to work on this. It's a very recognizable, very simple model, but it takes lots and lots of practice. So one of the first principles is that we use a guiding style, right? So we prefer to guide. A lot of times people say, well, I don't like that MI stuff because it's kind of more, I just kind of like following where the client goes. That's actually not what motivational interviewing is. Actually, MI comes from partly from a Rogerian kind of humanistic client-centered approach, but it also brings in some sort of a little bit of behavioral approach as well. And so when we're doing MI, we have a finish line focus for the conversation in most cases. Sometimes we are just there just to kind of help a client make a decision. I worked with a student just earlier last week and about trying to make a decision whether to, kind of go one direction or the other, whether to continue or maybe step away from the program due to some individual medical things. And I didn't have a stake in that conversation, but typically when we're using MI, we do have a finish line focus. So we're guiding that client to that finish line. So guiding lines between directing and following. Directing is straight up, directing is take one. You already experienced directing by take one today. And following is really going wherever the client goes. But guiding is more like we have a finish line focus in mind. And so MI teaches how to help that client get to that finish line focus. Principle number 2 is ambivalence. Is a normal part of preparing for change. One of the things I think that MI has done for me personally in my career is help me to avoid burnout. It can be very frustrating and exasperating sometimes when a client is ambivalent about change. That's the break room conversation for therapists a lot of times. Like, oh, great, got another wishy-washy client, the client sitting on the fence, and it's really frustrating. Whereas in MI, we expect that. We actually recognize that ambivalence is like a stepping stone toward change. You don't really go from not making any change to making change without first going through stepping on that stepping stone called ambivalence. So we just recognize that, okay, client's ambivalent today. Curious, okay. And we just kind of have an open curiosity and acceptance of that. People can be stuck there for a long period of time too. And this is an important one too. When a helper uses a directing style for change and argues for change with a person who's ambivalent, it can actually bring out the person's opposite argument, reinforcing that same point that I made earlier, that a person can come into the session or visit or interaction with us at this level of change, but actually leave with a lower level of change. So we can actually get in the way of change and make things worse by the way we do it. So that's kind of an important thing. The next principle is people are more likely to be persuaded by what they hear themselves say. So MI is a clinical approach that emphasizes a lot the content, what the person says. I think this is one of the most important things too, is because that we're striving to help the person talk themselves into change. If the helper or the clinician has a brilliant idea and the client has an idea, tie goes to the client. And it can be more effective to have a client kind of voice that. Now, sometimes we don't need to do that. Sometimes clients or individuals, any of us are pursuing a change. We're very, very motivated. We're very, very excited to make that change. We don't necessarily need like an MI approach. Just tell me what to do. That's fine. What we find though, when we're looking at change, is that most people are ambivalent, have some level of ambivalence. And this is an important approach to kind of help with that. So we're looking at helping people to talk themselves into change. And then the last principle I want to cover briefly here is that we're talking about things called change talk and sustained talk. Change talk and sustained talk are the two different types of types of verbiage or statements regarding change. I'll give you some examples here in a minute. So change talk is typified by any statement that reflects a desire to change, a reason to change, an ability to change, or a need to make a change. With my example of doing the mindfulness practice every day, it would be a desire to really want to do this. The reasons, I have lots of reasons to. For me, it is focus and stress management for sure. Also, by the way, I want to teach this to my clients, and this is one approach, by the way, the mindfulness approach is one that you want to do on your own. You want to be kind of a master of before you teach other people to do it. And then have an ability to do it. I think I can. I've had success in the recent past, so I can continue to succeed. And then a need to make a change. Those are all examples of change talk statements. With MI, we're constantly listening for change talk or sustained talk. We're kind of listening to both of those. And the really nice thing about it is that every time the client speaks, in one way or another, they're informing us as to whether we're moving toward the finish line focus or away from it. So it's really kind of a nice kind of process-based talk turn by talk turn kind of approach that helps us know where we are with the client. Sustained talk is the opposite. It maintains the status quo and moves away from change. So for the example of, if I just kind of really feeling stuck with mindfulness practice, I might say, yeah, I really don't want to anymore. I just kind of tried and just kind of got really frustrated, so I really don't want to anymore. Reasons, I've got reasons to do it, but I got reasons to do other stuff. I'm really busy right now, and I've got a lot of other projects going on, and plus, I just don't want to do that, make that part of my day. An ability, I tried, it didn't really work out. Or a need, I don't really need it as much anymore. It doesn't feel as urgent as it used to. Those are all examples of sustained time. So just kind of keep that aware of that. And so the idea is that we can substantially influence whether there's change talk or sustained talk. That's a really important thing. We can significantly affect whether there's more or less of that change talk. Any questions before I move on to the next portion real quickly? Questions about these 5 principles? So there's also something called the spirit of MI. The idea is to try to help, there's a lot of information on this slide, and I'll make this slide available, by the way. The spells of the acronym PACE, P-A-C-E, standing for partnership, acceptance, compassion, and evocation. The reason why the originators of motivational interviewing, Bill Miller and Steve Rolnick, came up with that idea of the spirit of MI is because sometimes you could actually use these principles for doing something to get people to do something you want them to do, or maybe to trick people into doing something that they don't want to do. And that kind of violates the spirit of MI, because that really doesn't result in lasting change. You rarely have a situation, well, you would never have the situation where a person says, oh, I know what you were doing all those times. You tricked me into controlling my blood sugar levels, and now my diabetes is controlled. You totally manipulated me. You would never have that kind of situation. Ultimately, is MI to help people do things that they really want to do, but are struggling to do it. So the idea of partnership is the first one. Partnership is that I'm an expert on perhaps behavior change or therapy or case management or in navigating Wasatch behavioral health, and you are the expert on you as a client. And so I would help that client. We're going to come together with our mutual expertise rather than I am the expert on everything and you sit back passively and I will inform you how to make changes. The second one is acceptance. We accept, kind of like we referred to earlier, we accept a person's ambivalence. We also accept the good parts about them too. C is compassion, and compassion has a generic term meaning as well. But in this context, compassion means doing what's in the client's best interest, what they want to do. And that's an important part of it too. And the last one, E, is evocation, which we're basically saying that we're going to try to call forth or bring out of that client what they have that might help them move toward change. It might be solutions, or it might be their own motivations, or it might be their values, or it might be even their own wisdom of what they know about themselves. And that's what we're trying to do. So PACE is kind of the spirit of MI, rather than it be kind of a way to try to sell the client on something. All right, so another acronym. By the way, these acronyms work well in English, PACE and OARS. They don't really work as well in non-English settings. I did my MI, sort of my MINT training for new trainers training in Ireland. It was really kind of nice, kind of fun place to go. But it was bringing together many people from many different cultures, and these acronyms don't work in other languages than English, unfortunately. But OARS are the kind of basic skills. And I'll give you a quick little overview of these. And a lot of times I'll teach my students, my social work students, about if you don't know what else to do. Sometimes just using oars, just keep rowing across the lake using your oars can be very helpful. O stands for open questions, A stands for affirmations, R stands for reflections, and S stands for summaries. We also have a kind of an MI approach for giving information and advice with permission. We cover those briefly, and then we'll get into some more practical aspects here. So open questions, a question invites a person to reflect and respond with more than a short answer. And it's probably the easiest way to get that change talk going. Like you had in take two, you had several examples, like 5 or 6 examples of open questions to help get change talk going. And I'm guessing from some of the comments that it worked most of the time, which is helpful. We want to try to actually use more open questions than closed questions. What's the effect of a closed question? If I were to say, have you thought of, let's see if the topic is quitting smoking, have you thought of using the patch? That's a yes or no question. What's a potential disadvantage of that question? Have you thought of using the patch? Any thoughts on that? Yes? Yeah, definitely my idea instead of their idea. That's one of many problems. The other problem is they could say, no, or yeah. So a closed question doesn't amplify things. We could actually shape it and say, what have you thought of? What kind of solutions have you thought of so far? And it's more of a conversation. So if you were to do MI coaching, we would count the number of open and closed questions and want you to favor more open questions than closed. These are examples. Desire, what don't you like about how things are right now? For desire, ability, what tells you that you're able to make this change, etc. Other questions right here. Okay, affirmations. So affirmations are kind of another important part of motivation. The affirmations are essentially trying to encourage clients' strengths, efforts, or values, for example. So we actually try to use more affirmations than what is called cheerleading. This is kind of where we bring a little bit of the kind of behavioral side into MI, where we're not just affirming general stuff like you're an awesome person, you're my favorite client, you are great. Nothing terribly wrong with those kinds of statements, but in MI we want to kind of bring it back to something that's more focused on change and moving toward that finish line focus. For example, you care a lot about your health, or you are successful in coming up with ways to make this change easier. Versus you're doing so well, you're awesome, you're my favorite client. Those things are a little bit more like cheerleading. So affirmation is an important part. By the way, the research shows that affirmation is the most strongly linked to making actual change. Good. And then reflections. Reflective listening is kind of the key thing, the crux of the oars. Effective reflective listening involves making a guess as to what that person means. So we want to do less simple and more complex reflections. Complex reflections are making a guess at the meaning, and they continue the paragraph. So if you were ever to do MI coaching, if I were to be your coach, I would watch you or listen to a recording of you or have you code and transcribe your interaction with a client, and I'd be looking for more reflections and questions. I'll provide a rationale in just a minute here, but what would be the advantage of doing lots more reflective listening than asking questions with a client? Any thoughts on that? An advantage of using reflective listening, please?
Well, for me, when I reflect on things, I do a lot more processing.
Yes.
I break it down even more.
Yeah, for sure. Right. So yeah, the comment was when you do more reflection of your own stuff, you're processing more, right? So the person's more active, more engaged. Good. Other thoughts, reactions, please.
I think that when I do that, my clients, I'm hearing what they think back again. So it's like a double.
For sure. Yeah. Yeah.
So,
It's kind of like a second run at what they're saying, right?
yeah.
They could process it twice in some ways, right? Especially if you get it right. Sometimes we don't get it right. That's okay.
And they can find, oh, wait a minute, actually, this is
Right.
not right.
Very good. So if our reflections are off, it can actually be an opportunity for the client to correct us and get back on track. So either way, you win, right? I think the other two advantages are that it feels less like an interrogation. Sometimes we get really kind of a little bit. Questions are pretty easy, and we don't want to feel like an interrogation. And I think when you do reflections, it's a very smooth process for to keep the spotlight on the client. When we ask a question, the spotlight comes on us for a moment. And we want to kind of keep the spotlight as much as we can on the client to kind of help them move forward in a fluid process moving toward change. Excellent. And so we would actually try to shoot for 2 for every 1 question we ask in an MI kind of session. We go for 2 reflections. So it's kind of moving forward. That's kind of a competency with the MI approach. Here's some examples. An example of a complex reflection. So we're kind of going to go deeper. The client says, I really struggle to become consistent with exercise. And the counselor would say, you're looking for ways to make exercise go more smoothly for you. Notice that in the reflection that the counselor offered, the client said nothing about looking for ways. The client only said, I'm really struggling to be consistent. And if that is an accurate or effective reflection, what might a client say after that? So here we go again. The client says, I've really struggled to be consistent with exercise. And then you as a counselor say, you are looking for ways to make exercise go more smoothly for you. If that is accurate, what might a client say afterward? Yeah. Sometimes that's all they say, yeah. They might say, I've actually looked at a couple of things, so they'll tell you, what if that's not an accurate reflection? What might a client say? According to your point, what would they say? You're looking for ways to make exercise go more smoothly for you.
No, it's not that, it's more this.
Good. Yeah, it's not that. It's more like this. Well, I already have some ways. I already know how I'm going to do it. I just need to kind of figure out a way to make myself do it. So good. Excellent. And then the last thing is summaries. So summaries are actually kind of collecting a bunch of different reflections, basically. We're kind of collecting all the different things. Here's an example of a summary. So let me take a minute and review some of the things you've said so far. You want to improve your exercise efforts, and you mentioned some specific reasons for doing so, including better stress management and less fatigue. You also noted that you have thought about some ways you can approach exercise differently this time. A summary is kind of a way of saying, kind of like navigating a map with your client. It can be like, I need to figure out where we are on the map. It's just almost like getting to a high point in the landscape and seeing our map. And in the military, we call it kind of shooting our azimuth. What's our direction of change or direction of travel? And we need to get oriented sometimes. So using a summary is kind of like, let's kind of pull together where we've been so far in our conversation and figure out where to go next. It's kind of a nice little metaphor for the summary. So that's ORS. Another one is called ATA. This is kind of a way to give information and advice. In MI, we try not to give unsolicited advice and unsolicited information. we try to be respectful. But there's always times, aren't there? There are always times we have to give information, whether that's clinic or agency policies and procedures, or maybe even giving a kind of a warning or a concern, expressing our concern for a client. We want to do it in a way that doesn't shut them down. There's no guarantee that ATA works, but ATA is ask, tell, ask. So we're going to simply just try to use kind of engage the client. So here's ask, tell, ask. The ask, this could be, would it be okay if I shared with you some ideas that help other people overcome depression? Hopefully the client says yes. What if the client says no? We're going to honor that. And that's important assessment information, right? Because the client's saying, no, I don't want to know. Okay. Oh, no. I gave a similar presentation to this last Monday at the Generations Conference, and it was about suicide. And we were talking about using the crisis response plan, the kind of Craig Ryan crisis response. Anybody heard of that one, the CRP? A couple of you. CRP is a very, very useful approach for helping kind of create like a safety plan for suicide. And I actually encouraged my participants last Monday to use ATA. Would it be okay if we talked about something called the CRP, crisis response plan, to kind of make sure that you have safeguards in place for suicide? And what if a client says no? That's important assessment information, isn't it, for crisis responders, right? They're not willing to engage in kind of a negotiate or kind of a collaborative process, right? Anyway, most clients say yes, by the way. We've been doing this for 20 years, and most clients say yes. They appreciate the respectful gesture of you asking permission. And then you tell them. Some people have found that talk therapy works very well, whereas other people find relief from medication. So kind of a psychoeducational statement here. We're going to keep it short, and then we're going to check back in with clients. What do you make of what I've shared so far? We're going to kind of ask, tell, ask. It's kind of a way to kind of stay engaged. Sometimes we as providers, maybe it's just me, but we as providers, sometimes when we get into information sharing mode, we go turbo mode. We go really lots and lots of information. And sometimes we take a little too carried away sometimes. So that's ask, tell, ask. So by the way, you can use, if you may not be committed to the whole idea of motivation. You may or may not. I'm guessing you came to this one versus other presentations that you probably are somewhat. But if nothing else, maybe grab some ideas that maybe stand out to you today that might be helpful for you for working with clients. Okay, now let's talk about the evoking. Evoking is kind of the nuts and bolts, one of the key skill sets, which sets my approach apart from other kind of approaches. And it's also a little harder to learn, a little harder piece to learn. So the first one is eliciting change talk, and the take 2 was a great example of lots of ways to elicit change talk. You could ask evocative questions. You can use the importance group. I'll describe that in just a moment. You can query extremes. So I'll give you examples of all these. The evocative questions are take 2. What are your top 3 reasons for making this change? An example, an evocative question. The importance ruler. This is kind of a nice little tool we use. Most of my workshops cover the importance ruler, and or the confidence ruler. Let's try the confidence ruler. The confidence ruler is this. You basically go this way. You say, on a scale of 1 to 10, how confident are you, also Dave, that you can be more consistent with your mindfulness practice? I'd say about a 7. Okay, so you're about a 7. And then what we do from this point on, we actually ask why the person's not a lower number. So my helper would say, Dave, why are you not a 6? Why are you not a lower number, like a 6 or a 5 or even a 4? And I would say, well, I've had success in the past, so I think it gives me confidence now to have success in the future. Why don't we ask the opposite, do you think? What if I were to say, Dave, you're a 7, why are you not an 8 or a 9? Think about what I might say there. I might say, well, it's hard. And I've failed in the past. I've tried and I've failed. What did I just say? What kind of a statement is that? I've tried and it's hard, and I've failed in the past. That's called sustained talk. Okay, so we actually want to kind of reflect down the ruler. It's kind of a handy little tool. In my experience, about 90% of the time it works. Sometimes it doesn't, but okay. Querying extremes would be essentially if you. What's the worst thing that could happen if you don't make any changes at all? Or what's the best thing that could happen if you make some changes right now? Looking back and looking forward. Looking back, looking back when this was not a problem for you, what was going on for you? Kind of like those of you familiar with solution-focused approaches, that's kind of a solution-focused approach. Or looking forward, if you did make this change, what would you see, what would be different for you? What would be different or improving These are all examples of trying to find ways to kind of elicit change talk. All right, any questions about these so far? Again, just give you a really high overview of these. Responding to change talk is another important skill. So not just getting it going, but responding to it. I tell my students kind of like free money. You know, clients like giving us free money. When they actually engage in change talk, man, it's really important just to kind of really to reflect that and to kind of bring that into focus into the conversation, because it's them talking themselves into change. It's kind of that experience that here in the firm where we talked about. I didn't have that burden of having to come up with change on my own. So elaboration. Tell me more about that. You were able to succeed a year ago with this change topic. What was going on for you? We're going to ask that and also maybe kind of reflect on that as well. Affirmation, commenting positively on the person's statement. You worked hard to get that change to occur. Reflecting, continuing paragraph, and then summarizing. So those are all examples of responding to change talk. Now, what about sustained talk? What about sustained talk? That was what was the comment you made here in the front row on my left here? You think you said, "I don't know and I don't care." Is that what it was?
Yes.
Darn it! Yeah, that's hard. I do see a couple folks from the former ADAPT training, and so a couple of you. I actually borrowed some of the statements from our training there. So, how many of you were the former ADAPT program? You larger gentleman there. I forgot your name. But great to see you again. We actually did quite a bit of training together a couple summers ago. And that was a lot of fun. But this actually comes from our exercise called Sustained Talk Dodgeball. And one was, I've already lost everything, so what's the point? What's the point of going into treatment? What's the point of continuing to work on this? What's the point of trying to get into recovery? What's the point of trying medications, whatever? So this person's pretty discouraged, aren't they? So I'm going to give you a quick little kind of examples of responding to sustained talk. Now, I could do a following response. What would be a very accurate reflection response from that statement? I'm trying to reflect exactly what the client is saying.
I'm asking, so what is the point?
Right, so what is the point, right? So you want to kind of get to the heart of it. So a reflective statement could also be, you're feeling really discouraged. Now that's a very accurate reflection, right? Yeah, I'm really discouraged. It's hard stuff. Now there's nothing inherently wrong with that response. Notice, however, where it took us. So a client says, I've already lost everything else, so what's the point? You're feeling really discouraged. Yeah, totally discouraged. I don't see any point in continuing this at all. Notice where that took us. So this is a very advanced skill, but here's an example from the former ADAPT team that talked about that. I know your team calls something different now. So the person said, you've been through some hard things lately, and you were looking for hope. That is a complex reflection because the client said nothing about hope, but we're kind of guessing that that's what the client needs, what's the core need or what's there. So if this works, what might the client say afterward? You've been through some hard things lately and you're looking for hope. What do you think? Just kind of use your imagination again. What might a client say if that's an accurate reflection? And there's some hard things. You're looking for hope. Yeah, please.
Step into like hopefulness.
Yeah.
Like how to get that instead of talking about discouragement.
Yeah, if it works, if it's accurate, the client says, yeah, I'm at wit's end. I gotta have something. I gotta have something to keep me going. And that's really kind of fledgling, really small change talk, but that's something, right? We move in that direction. There's another comment over here.
I think that person would pick up on your last word of hope.
Yeah, sure.
And then elaborate. Yeah, I'm looking for hope, but I don't think there's any hope out there.
Sure.
It's hopeless, or like you said.
Yeah.
But anybody pick up on that last word you said.
Exactly, right. So we are, our finish line focus is to try to get to the point where we're trying to turn the tide from discouragement to hope, right? Comment back, please.
And also, if you're not close to it, they can correct you, which is actually what you're looking for.
Yeah.
You're wanting their direction so that you can find what work.
For sure, yeah, right. I could say simply, well, it's not hope I need. I just need some cash. I need to pay for childcare and rent. Okay, cool. So we kind of get into the bottom of what's going on. Here's another one. I don't understand why the judge put me in jail. It wasn't my fate. I love it. I don't understand why the judge put me in jail. It wasn't my fate. So we could easily reflect and say, You're feeling unfairly targeted right now. Yeah, can't believe these people, yeah, they're always kind of unfairly going after me kind of thing. So we kind of got more into sustained talk. Any ideas how we might want to shift this more towards some change talk? Creative reflections here. What can we say to this client? I don't understand, it wasn't my paper. Here's what the team came up with during the dodgeball game called Sustained Talk Dodgeball. You recognize your choices are causing you trouble. So that might be a little sentimentally hard. The client might say, well, I'm not, it wasn't my choices. Or if it works, the client will say, yeah, I can see that. So kind of a gentle way to kind of move back toward change. Here's one more. I've been here 5 times and I can teach these stupid classes. That was great. I've been here 5 times, I can teach these stupid classes. Great, welcome to group. What do you say to this client?
Very knowledgeable.
There you go, good job, yeah, very creative. Yeah, you know a lot. You've earned a lot, right? Now we got to make sure that we're not saying that in a sarcastic fashion, and you were not for sure, but we got to make sure that it's sincere. Like you've invested a lot in your recovery. You've learned a lot over the years. Here's one of the responses I really liked from that group. You're looking for some different insights about addiction this time around. Clever, kind of clever, and creative. So that's one of the hardest skills when you're dealing with sustained talk. We're trying to find a way to shape the conversation back. So what I'm offering this for you is to kind of get a vision as to where you could be after you practice and kind of work with your mind to kind of get there. What I teach my students is to kind of pause when a client engages in sustained talk to kind of say, okay, listen carefully here. Would it be that we could slow down time during those moments, right? Slow down to I remember a long time ago, like some of the sci-fi superhero movies where they slow down time, or you can kind of stop and call it, kind of like that. You can see it coming towards you. Wouldn't it be nice if we could kind of slow down our clinical interactions that way too? But the idea is to slow it down and kind of listen to what's the core need? What's the core need the client they maybe not fully expressing, but really needing right now? The first example here is hope. The second example is, I need to kind of get a sense of understand my contributions to the problem. The third one is I'm looking for, what's this third person looking for? What's the core need here? What's a potential core need of this person? I've been here 5 times, I can teach these stupid classes. What's that?
A solution.
A solution, yeah. Needing a different pathway forward. Feeling frustrated, right? Okay, all right. Okay, so here's some, that's kind of a nutshell. Here's some key resources for learning MI. These will be on the slides, by the way. The first one's the book, the 3rd edition of the Motivational Review. It came out in 2013. I think a newer one's coming out in a couple of years, but it's a very good book. It's actually on the, I'm not trying to get any kickbacks from it, by the way. I don't get any endorsements or any commission. But it is on the top 10, on the top 10 most influential books by the Psychotherapy Network. They rated him on the top 10 most influential books of psychotherapy. It's a nice read. Students who take my class usually say, yeah, I really enjoyed that book. It was a lot more interesting, a lot more helpful, engaging. Let me do this last slide, and then we'll actually do another practical exercise. If anyone would like to try to maybe, I'd love to do like a real play with somebody who'd like be willing to kind of come up and do that. I know it's a little intimidating. Mic fright's a real thing. But if you think about it, if you'd be willing to kind of come up and maybe work with me, just like a 5-minute real play, I'll do a little demo of MI for you today. And hope it'll work. But this is MI on one slide. We were challenged in my motivation review training to put everything onto one slide. And this is essentially it. I'm going to go over each thing real quick here. So essentially what we're trying to do is we have evoking goals. That's the finish line focus. We're trying to strengthen change talk and to soften sustained talk. Again, that's not back up really practical. Every talk turn, my client's kind of informing me whether we're moving closer to this finish line focus or further away from it. And then, of course, the spirit, the partnership. I'm an expert on behavior change. You're the expert on you. Acceptance. I accept everything about you, including that you're ambivalent. Compassion. I want to help you do what's in your best interest, not just in mine. And evocation. You have answers. You have resources. I'm going to try to call forth and bring out from you. We have the core skills, of course, the ORs, questions, affirmations, reflections. I put reflections in bold because that's a little bit harder thing to learn. It's also kind of the main skill that we use. And then there's a thing called 4 processes. So whenever we interact with a client, we're engaging, focusing, evoking, and then planning. It's kind of like the four processes we work through. So engaging is kind of like the metaphor is essentially that we are, say I'm a mountain guide. I'm going to be helping you ascend a peak on the Wasatch Front somewhere. And so the engaging would be essentially saying, do you want to hire me as your guide? And we're going to kind of negotiate that. And then the focusing would be, okay, cool, you want to hire me? Right on. Which peak do you want to climb? And then the evoking would be, what do you want to get out of this mountain climb? What do you want to get out of this excursion? And then the planning would be, okay, now that we're there, let's figure out our course, our equipment list, and our itinerary for climbing the mountain. That's what we do. So that's an MI in one's life, kind of a handy little tool. And then, okay, so let's do that. Would anyone care to do a little role play with me? Just to do a little practice, could be like a simple little, one of the topics that you had mentioned. Yeah, you want to come up? Okay, appreciate it, great. We'll honor social distancing. Let's give your crisis representative a hand. So, is it okay to just kind of go, what's your name, please? Bryn. Okay, great. All right, so why don't we take maybe like 5 minutes, and I'll just kind of talk to you about maybe something you think about changing. You okay with that? Okay, let me get my timer set here. And what I want the rest of you to do, let's actually have, we're kind of in halves. If you're on this side of the room, this side of the projector, I want you to keep count of the number of reflections and the number of questions that I uttered during my interaction with Bryn. Sound like a plan? And if you're on this side of the room, I want you to keep track of the number of sustained talk and change talk statements that Bryn engages in. Now, Bryn, if you have selected a bona fide or real legit change topic, you're likely going to engage in both, so that's fair game. So does that sound like a fair assessment? So we're going to do that. Okay. All right, so thank you again for being on. You're awesome. It takes a bold personality, and you're probably well suited for your working process, right? All right. Okay, Brandon, tell me what you think about changing.
So I compete powerlifting, and I'm kind of deciding whether to drop down to another weight class or get stronger, which means gaining weight. So I'm kind of stuck between those two because there's both benefits, and one's a lot more enjoyable than the other, but one's probably better for my health. So that's
Sure. You're kind of at a crossroads right now.
Yeah.
You're trying to figure out what's the best way to go. Is something that you value a lot, the powerlifting, something you're important to you.
It's fun. Yeah, it's brought a lot of meaning. So.
Sure, yeah. It's been something that has been helpful for you and maybe invigorating and something that you really enjoy.
Yeah, it's part of like my self-care, something that's completely different from what I do at work, and it really kind of gets me excited to focus and see progression.
Yeah. So it's a nice outlet. I mean, you kind of need it to kind of keep your mental health and your well-being and your work, and also just it's invigorating. It's exciting to see that progress.
Yeah.
And now you're at this crossroads trying to figure out where whether to go to the next weight class, which would be like a next frontier, or maybe to slow down and maybe kind of stay where you are.
Well, it's more like dropping weight, so losing a significant amount of weight to compete in a more competitive weight class.
Okay.
Or just like eat as much as I want and get super strong. At least that's the goal. So yeah.
It's tough because there's pros and cons in both directions.
Yeah.
And you mentioned your health. What's best for your health?
Right. Yeah, because we have a lot of heart issues in my family, and being heavier set doesn't really help with that. I have a higher BMI, so this is kind of like it's fun to be strong, but I also have to live longer.
Yeah, right.
So.
It's kind of like there's the front and center concern is this like opportunity to become to really reach that next threshold of strength and ability to do powerlifting. And then the longer term kind of concerns and considerations are maybe I need to kind of be mindful of longer term health, keep a family history. Yeah. So you're kind of, just to summarize here for a moment, this is a really important part of your life, really important part of what you do, and it's an important element. And it's been a very invigorating thing to see that progress for sure. And as you're considering what the next steps are, you're mindful of kind of the appealing aspect of, I can eat whatever the heck I want.
Yeah.
just gonna let it go. And then also that piece about maybe I need to kind of be more mindful of the longer term aspects, of health and family history. Yeah, so I'm wondering, you may not have a decision ready right now, but I'm wondering what you are thinking about doing at this point. I talked about 3 or 4 minutes.
I think I've been leaning towards dropping weight, which I have been doing.
Okay.
It's just, I feel I'm just kind of tired and sick. I'd rather just, this might sound weird, but like there's a skill in eating a lot. I feel like I'm really good at that. So some people struggle with that. So like I want to be able to use what I'm best at to progress. But yeah, like I said, there's always in the back of my head is like, maybe you should.
Yeah.
Maybe you should.
So you're still at that decision point right now. We didn't necessarily resolve it in 3 minutes.
No, weird.
So with that in mind, then I wonder what would be the next thing for you to do to kind of make a clear decision? I mean, I guess what information do you need to make the best decision for you long term?
Kind of the question is what would be most sustainable at the moment?
Yeah.
Just because I got a lot of life changes at work and personal life, and so like, kind of what decision would cause me to have more like the most success is kind of how I'm feeling right now.
For sure, right? Yeah, right. You want to succeed. It's important for you to succeed and make this a successful decision, whatever you choose. And sustainability, given all the other demands that you have in your life, is very important to consider. So whatever change you make is going to have to fit in and kind of go with some of the pressures and stresses that you have going on.
And I guess to answer your question more, like I haven't. There's a meet in September I want to sign up for that I haven't signed up for yet.
Okay.
And so if I can get into that meet, I think that would kind of tip the scales of me dropping weight.
Okay, sure.
But I don't know if I can get in because with COVID, everyone's competing now because I haven't been able to do it for a year. So
Yeah, sure.
I guess I need to know whether I can get into that meet or not. So
That would make a big difference for you.
yeah, it would.
Yeah. Awesome. All right, so we've talked about 4.5 minutes, and what are your takeaways from our conversations?
I need to go sign up for the meet, see if I can get in. Because if I can't, then I can, do what I want. But
Okay.
so if I get in, then I want to more focus on dropping those pounds.
Okay, cool. So you kind of have a clear next step for you.
Yep.
Excellent.
Thank you.
Thank you for your time, Paul. You're good man. Right, and I'm not listening to the philosophy. You'll be the judge in a minute. Actually, Brady gets the last word in a minute here as to how that went for him, as to whether that was weird or whatever. But let's start with thank you. Let's start with our my left-hand side. What was the ratio of reflections to questions? Please.
Just numerically, I have 4 questions and 9 reflections.
4 questions, 9 reflections. Okay, good. Yeah, so roughly in the 2-to-1 ratio. Good. Any other counts? Does that seem right to everybody? Good. Thank you. Yeah, so I tried to maintain more important than the bean counting the numbers. How did that go? How did that go using a reflective kind of a more reflection kind of a process? Was it weird? Does it seem meandering? I think a couple of times I could have maybe changed directions, done something better or different. But how did it go? What do you think? As a group, what were your reactions to using a reflective kind of approach to talking with Brent about powerlifting? Weird, hard, smooth? Yeah, please, in the back.
I thought it felt a little weird, just because you're reflecting a lot, right? He's not just talking, which I think is what happens in my practice.
Sure, yeah.
Talk a lot, and I'm not so great at reflecting, so it felt a little jarring to me.
Sure, yeah.
But it also felt like he probably felt pretty heard.
Okay. Yeah, right, yeah. Yeah, so and Bryn will have Bryn answer that question in just a moment here. I think whether he felt heard or not. But yeah, so it's a different approach than the typical kind of status quo kind of approach. Did we make movement? I guess that's the kind of the bottom line. Did we make movement toward a finish line focus? What are your thoughts? Please, in the middle.
I was going to say, one of the things I like about MI is that you come from a place of the client being the expert, and if you rely too much on that, then they stay where they're at without change, right?
Yeah.
And if we become the expert and we take over that role, then they just stay in their place and they don't change.
Yeah.
But if we are that joint team
Sure.
and reflect and have that interaction, then then it invokes that change, and that's what helps things move along.
Good. Yeah, thank you. Yeah, so it's more of a collaborative approach. It's more of a collaboration with the clients, not disempowered. Good. What about change talk versus sustain talk? What did you all on this side of the room? Did you count? Do you have an idea of change versus sustain? Yes.
I
please.
have about a 10-to-1 ratio in favor of change.
Oh, good. Yeah, 10-to-1 ratio in favor of change talk. Good. And it was an interesting topic that Brendan you raised because it was kind of more like a decision. You could go this way or that way. I deliberately kind of steered it a little bit more for a minute. I steered it more toward the long-term health kind of thing. But I think I backed off from that a little bit too. But overall, there's more change talk than sustain talk, right? Good. Excellent. So in that respect, I kind of met the technical kind of requirements and motivation we're doing. But let's any other reactions to that little real play? Anybody have any reactions to it? Okay, Brendan, what was your takeaway? What was your takeaway from it? I mean, in terms of, let me actually give the mic again. In terms of your, where you
I think the thing for me that was like the most impactful was you asked me like, what do I need to know to make the nexus? Like, because I didn't even think about that. Sure. And so that when you asked me that, I kind of like with the nerves, I got my brain going over. But that's when I realized like, well, am I going to be even able to compete? Because if I can't, then I can prepare for the next meet and I have more time. So that was, I think, the most, I don't know what you call it, the evoking part.
Yeah, sure, yeah.
For me.
Yeah, right.
Was just asking like, what do I need to know to make a decision?
Okay.
So, and then the reflections were nice because as you were reflecting, I realized what I was hearing wasn't quite what I meant. And so I was able to help me re-clarify even myself kind of what I meant by it. And you gave some contrast to my own thoughts of what you were hearing, if that's clear.
Yeah, sure. Awesome. Thank you for sharing. So did we make some progress? Did we make a couple steps toward?
Yeah, because like I said, I've been just sitting and looking at the meet schedule and just like, just gotta see if I can get in. So that's the main thing. So
Okay, great. Thanks for
it's
feedback.
very helpful.
I appreciate it very much. Thanks a lot. Okay, so that's a quick demonstration illustration. If we were to work together in a more kind of systematic fashion, we would do feedback and coaching, and especially like looking at actual recordings of your interactions with clients or with each other, and then also making some suggestions for how to run it. So sadly, second bullet point, you can't leave a 1 hour workshop and be ready to roll on. Sorry. It's simple. It's a simple model, but it's not easy. It takes a bit of learning. So here's going to be 3 different levels if you walk out of here today. The first level is, simply, we can, at the very, very minimum, just stop looking for trouble. We might find some ways to reduce roadblocks to listening and also to avoiding listening sustain time. Maybe you find that after our conversation today, maybe, hey, I realize I'm maybe doing some things that are steering the conversation more towards sustain talk and effectively talking the client out of change sometimes. That's level 1. Level 2 might be to learn and practice evoking skills. And I think we're talking about like specific things to strengthen the change talk and the soft sustain talk. And the third level would be all in. I want to engage in ongoing coaching practice based on practice samples. That's kind of that's how we do that. This is just a quick little summary that workshops alone are not sufficient, but really what we can do on the right-hand side is peer learning groups or video trainings or reading books or book discussion groups. This is a picture of the copy of the Motivational 3rd edition, and that's what we're going to cover for today. Any concluding questions today based upon our time together on Motivational 3? Please go.
So I understand you said that after one workshop, not like ready to whatever, but like if you're an experienced motivational interviewer, do you find that you use this in both your professional life and your personal life, or is there danger in incorporating your personal life? Let's just say there's an issue or topic, let's say topic, that's less negative sounding, that you want to bring up with your wife. Is that dangerous territory? Because if she's not bringing it up, are you like poking the fire?
So the question was, do you use MI, me personally, I use MI across the board, not just in clinical situations, but in other situations. I will say that I think the whole planet can do better at listening, especially this age and this time. We can do a better job of listening. MI is based upon very accurate and very clear listening. I tend to ask permission with my spouse or my children before I use like kind of evoking skills, because that's kind of a sensitive kind of thing. So I don't use it routinely. I don't use the evoking skills routinely in my normal interactions, but I do strive personally in my life to do better listening all the time. And hopefully people, when they interact with me, they oh yeah, when Dave is talking to me, listening to me, he's going to reflect back what I'm going to hear. And it doesn't feel weird because it's kind of my MO. That's what I do. But, does that answer your question? Okay. All right. Any other questions or comments? Please, yes.
Do you ever say to them, you could look back 10 years from now, what do you think you would have wanted to do?
Yeah,
Do you ever use that?
For sure, yeah. It's like a looking forward kind of evoking question. Like if you were to, zoom forward in the future and looking back, or what would you say to yourself from the future, right? Looking forward, if you did make this change, what would be different?
Yeah, because that's what I would have asked him. It's like 15
Yeah,
years
uh-huh.
from now, would you look back and what would you tell that yourself?
Sure, yeah. Cool. Yeah, it's a nice kind of a powerful way to change perspective a little bit. Good. Last comment or question? Okay. Thank you, Wasatch Behavioral Health. I appreciate your time.